time is about 10 o'clock, Sue?
Yes.
10 o'clock, March 13th, Thursday night.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird? Look at that. And they all went on in a sequence, too. Now, the thing that puzzles me is they can't be ordinary streetlights. They're going off now, right?
Yeah,
One
went
drop.
off.
The thing that's amazing is that it must be so bright that they would carry, because we're looking at about 25 miles away. The middle one now.
There one. Oh,
The two
another
are-
one.
There's another one.
Yep,
Last
there
one?
goes one.
We got the last one left. Still burning.
And usually we've seen them over.
It's gone.
What are some other, things that you would want to say about this, Phoenix Lights situation? Something we didn't cover, or something you want to make sure, any of y'all want to bring up?
Something that I would like to say, and I'm not a skeptic or a disbeliever in the phenomenon, right? But there are specific cases that I think we need to just look at with a close lens and, make a decision about what we think happened based on whatever facts are available. And unfortunately for the Phoenix Lights, the facts are mostly eyewitness testimony. And my uncle, who's a lawyer, has always said something that I think is really funny, but he said that in a courtroom, eyewitness testimony is one of the worst forms of evidence you can have. And I'd like to tie that into a couple of ways that people describe what they saw with the Phoenix Lights. People say that they saw a V-shaped craft, a solid triangle object with 5 to 7 lights in a V shape. And they also say that they saw individual light sources flying across the sky. Well, Phoenix is a big city, and there's no lack of light pollution and pollution in general here. In fact, nowadays, when I go out at night, if the moon is out, I can barely see any stars at all. So if a bright light or a series of lights were to fly overhead, bright enough for me to focus in on, my eyes might adjust to not even seeing the stars and lights above them. So when people say that they saw a hard but nuts and bolts craft flying across the sky, I think that it's possible that people may have seen a series of lights. I personally think that there's probably a prosaic explanation for what those lights were, but just by seeing them, they might not be seeing the stars above them and trick themselves into thinking that they're seeing a physical craft. Another thing that you brought up, and I know that you're
Another awesome, smart thing I brought up. Yeah, please
yeah,
continue.
super smart.
Yeah,
Which is that
please.
people get confused about what the Phoenix Lights was. Was it one incident? Was it two incidents? And the media doesn't do a really great job of sort of separating that.
Sure.
Again, back to eyewitness testimony, I think that our minds and our experiences have a hard time separating that. So now imagine that you're out with your family and you see a very strange, unusual formation of lights flying overhead, and you're excited and you grab your family and you say, "Come out here, honey, come look at this," right? And then by the time everybody gets out there and notices it, it's gone. But then you're out all night waiting to see something else. And you see a series of really bright lights high up in the sky, far off in the distance. And those stay there for a good amount of time. And maybe that they're 20, 30 miles away. And when you see how far across the sky they are, you're thinking, oh my God, that must be huge. You wake up the next morning and you might think to yourself, what we saw was huge. And I think that that's just human nature. And it's a part of the evidence gathering that's happened, that maybe people think they saw a mile-wide craft. Maybe that person just saw two things happen. And then when they woke up in the morning, their memories sort of blended together.
I mean, I guess that's possible. It's like you confused the opening band with the headliner, and you got
You had a
mixed up
couple
on
of
the
drinks.
songs.
I don't see why
Yeah.
that wouldn't happen.
Sure. No, that's interesting. Look, is there video so the video footage that's like the main stuff that I use in the trailer for the Phoenix Lights, is that the only footage that's out there? And is that like, is there footage of both events, if you will?
So technically, yes, I think there is footage of both events, although there's not a lot in total, but there's significantly more of the second event than the first. It's very hard to come by anything that is easily discernible, but there are some videos that do show some form of a triangle shaped formation of lights flying overhead.
Okay, look, if y'all can do me a favor, the only links to send me in our thing on Discord, just links to the video. If you know it's the first or second event, and if you can label that in the, you know what I mean? If you send the link and say, oh, this is the first event. Because I'm not sure the video I showed which event that is. If it's the lights earlier on or later on. Because are people thinking that these lights lasted for 3 hours?
No, no, absolutely not. The second event was something that I believe lasted no longer than several minutes to like 20 minutes or something like that. The first event, people saw something flying overhead, and if you were standing in Phoenix and you saw something fly overhead, that might last only 30 seconds or a minute, depending on what's obstructing your view.
Sure.
And
Sure.
so, yes,
Okay,
the
I
ones that
see.
you showed were the second event, which
Got
was
it. Because that's when they did the demonstration to show that the lights went behind the mountain using that
yeah,
footage, right?
yeah.
Okay, so that's the second. Okay, so what do you think exactly happened? Are you thinking that the first event was the training from these Canadian snowbirds, and the second event is the Maryland Air National Guard with the flares?
Doing something coincidentally also called Operation Snowbird.
Snowbird? Yeah.
Yes, that's what I think.
That's
I
kind of crazy too, right? Like that these both events happened that night that cause you a mass UFO confusion, two different
right.
event. That is kind of, and they're both called snowbirds.
Very strange, but that is what I think. And
Yeah.
I
I
think
mean,
that
it's
there's
not any
also
stranger than aliens. I mean, it's not.
I guess you're right. It's not stranger than interdimensional beings
Yeah,
somehow morphing and
sure. Although I find that very compelling, these big V-shaped craft coming over the city, Independence Day style. I mean, this is either, when did Independence? I think this came out
less
before
than
Independence Day
so in
or
no,
after.
Independence Day was less than a year before the Phoenix Lights.
Okay, so almost a year later,
Yeah.
this happens. Okay,
Yeah.
dude, people definitely had Independence Day in their mind. Let's be
Oh,
real, because
absolutely.
that's the number one image, is the UFO going over the city, like massive UFO
Yeah.
going over the city.
And Will Smith was
Um,
huge at the time. It was like the Will Smith summer blockbuster era of the 90s. And so the most
yeah,
recent blockbuster movie was Independence Day. And people
yeah,
probably thought that
that's interesting.
the Phoenix
I
Capitol
still
was
find
about
that
to get
exciting,
blasted.
though. I don't know. I still find it exciting. But would you still argue though that it's, because you said that what makes it compelling is that it's still unresolved. So do you still think it's unresolved, even though those are your two leading theories?
I do think that it's officially unresolved. I don't
Got
think
it.
Arrow has done a report on it to
Yeah,
close or leave the case open. And I don't think any other agency, military or government or otherwise, has put out a definitive statement to explain the entire process, the entire
got
event.
it. Got it. All right, I like that. Yeah. All right, that's interesting too. All right, part of the what we covered before, no real official investigation, right? No formal investigation into this. And regardless of what you think about it, it's a fact that something happened that night, or a couple things happened that night, and thousands of people called in and were witness to it, which is crazy that we wouldn't look, even if it is just to say officially it was the flares, and here's the data to show, and blah blah blah. And the first thing was these Canadian snowbirds. We slapped them on the wrist. We told them they shouldn't be training illegally, dogfighting in the desert, practicing their shows. I mean, whatever. That would be nice to have, right? That would be nice to come out and say. It's even the governor changing his story is so interesting, because he gives an official statement that a lot of people use for a long time about the Phoenix Lights, and then he's the guy to come out and go, well, actually, I was approached by some guys. I changed my story. I don't know. That's kind of interesting. What do you think about that?
So I would love to know more exactly what you mean by he was approached by somebody before he changed his story. What I do know about him is
Good
that
question. That's what I would have said.
Yeah, he openly he openly mocked everybody who said they saw something, which I think is disrespectful, because thousands of people called in and they definitely saw something. And then months later, the Maryland National Guard admitted to doing something, but he came out before that happened with a guy in an alien costume, basically telling Arizona and the world that you were crazy for thinking you saw something, which is so on brand for how people are treated in the UFO community regardless.
Sure.
But then he did come out later and say specifically that he had an experience that he didn't know how to explain. So was what he saw the V flying overhead, or was what he saw the flare drop and he was still unaware of what that was at the time? I'm not sure.
That's the thing. I don't know if we'll ever. How certain are we that they're two separate events, as you would say?
So when you say,
scale, 100%,
so when you say,
on a scale of 100%.
we, I think that's really interesting, because I can tell you, I personally am 100% certain that there's two separate events. But when you say we as a community, I think it's very divided. And also I think that people just haven't seen enough information clearly laid out timelines to show what was taken credit for, and does that also account for all of the reports that happened before that. So I think that the answer to your question in general is no, I don't think it's clear, but for me it is.
You being from Phoenix, you've heard stories, maybe family, this, that, too. It kind of rumbles through, and you just hear all this extra stuff that someone normally is not going to get. And just understanding the conditions of where you live and how that affects vision as well, and even the audible sound, right? Things can be blocked from mountains and it doesn't make its way. So, muted, echoey, there could be a multitude of different anomalies that sort of affect this. And it's great to get context from you as well.